Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo back again with yet another Alchemy deck because I know everybody loves Alchemy. I was looking at the latest batch of Alchemy cards that are tied to Ixalan, and there's actually a couple of dinosaurs that I was pretty impressed by, or dinosaur-themed cards. First one, this Scalespeaker Shepherd, not a dinosaur, but it's a 3-mana 2-1, and you draft a dinosaur from its spellbook, and then it makes all your dinosaurs cost 1 less to cast. The spellbook is mostly very good dinosaurs, or, pretty good dinosaurs. There's probably the worst one is this, where is it? 7-mana Verdant Sun's Avatar, which is like a life gain dinosaur. It's a 7-mana 5/5. Not very good, but most of the other ones are pretty happy to get. I mean, some of the hits are cards I just actually even have in my deck, like Etali. So that's pretty nice, and then the cost reduction's nice. And this other one is probably the better of the two, the Wingbane Vantasaur. So for 4 mana, you get a 4/5 reach, which is not quite at rate, but it's not that bad. And then you get your choice of either Savage Stomp, which is a great dinosaur fight spell, or Naturalize, which is a card that has a decent amount of targets in Alchemy. So this is actually this is a pretty strong card. And the two of these together made me think, okay, these are both cards with good comes into play abilities, and I always love playing Spawning Pod or Birthing Pod style decks. So I made my deck into a Spawning Pod deck. And so if we look at the Spawning Pod chain, I go up to Palani's Hatcher, which is a little bit of a disappointment at 5. I mean, it's on theme. It's a dinosaur card with like enter the battlefield abilities, but this is not a card that I would probably put in my deck normally. If I wasn't looking for a very specific, like, 5-drop that has to have a comes into play ability. It's a little bit underrated. But then at 6 and 7 mana, you get the reason to do this. Trumpeting Carnosaur, pretty strong card, just to put in your deck, even if you're not planning to pot into it. It's, perfectly reasonable. Mostly it's gotten played in combo-y kind of decks, but it is just a generally good card. And then the really heavy hitter, the Etali. This is obviously a very good card to cast. So if you're not familiar with Spawning Pod, you don't get to choose the creature. You seek the creature that meets the criteria, which is what mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana value. So the way you control this is you only put one specific creature at each casting cost. So I go 4, 5, 6, 7, and I know what I'm going to get consistently. I do have a little bit of variety at 3 where I could get a Huatli or a Scalespeaker, which they're functionally pretty similar cards in my deck. But you're not guaranteed what you're going to get if you pot a 2-drop into a 3-drop, but it's not that at the lower end, it's usually not that big of a deal. My 2-drops are a bunch of mana creatures like this 2-mana guy that's on theme for playing with dinosaurs. Bramble Familiar, which has the upside that sometimes you do cast Fetch Quest, and Fetch Quest is a pretty nice hit off of Etali because, well, you basically can play it as Fetch Quest. Off of the Carnosaur, you can't play it as Fetch Quest. You're just getting a Bramble Familiar, which it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not exciting. And then a couple Ruby Daring Trackers, which I think is the next best mana creature. It honestly might be better than the Bramble Familiar, but it is legendary, so I didn't want to play a ton of them. Couple of Abrades just have a little bit of removal. It's hard in a Spawning Pod deck to play a ton of removal because you want to play a really high creature density because you want to make sure you have something to sack when you have the pod, and you need like a pretty long curve of creatures to go up the chain. And I've tried in the past like playing only one copy of cards at certain casting costs, and it really makes it so your pods like they fall off in value very quickly once you stop being able to consistently like pot up the chain, which is why I like playing at least 2 copies of each casting cost. I went up to 3 Carnosaur just because it was a card I was pretty happy to draw, and it also has this discard ability to deal 3 damage, which sometimes you want to do that just to fill a turn where you otherwise wouldn't be using your mana. And then Delighted Halfling, which is certainly the best 1-drop that's legal in Alchemy, and it's just a great card for this kind of green-red ramp deck. The mana, I started playing with 4 Cavern of Souls at first, And that did screw up my mana some because this deck has a mix of creature types. Like, it's all dinosaurs at the high end, but at the lower end, it's humans and halflings. And this thing is an elemental raccoon. So I cut down on Cavern of Souls. Also, there aren't that many counters that can counter your creatures that are actually played in Alchemy. Reprieve is the thing that people mostly gravitate towards if they want to counter. And Cavern of Souls doesn't work against it because it doesn't counter the creature. It just returns it to your hand. Outside of that, I've got, 12 good duels. I decided to play all 4 Restless Ridgelines because this deck does have a lot of mana in it, so sometimes you just want something to do with your lands, so activating this thing is a reasonable way to spend a turn some of the time. And also, like, you do have a bunch of small creatures that if buffing them when you attack, it allows you to attack with more things than you might otherwise be able to. And 2 copies of Captivating Crossroads, just because I think this land is pretty free to put in my deck for the most part. It's just, a red-green pathway most of the time. Like, occasionally you'll be on the play and it would have to come into play tapped. But most of the time you'd be able to play it on turn 1. It's only really going to be bad in hands where you're, like, on the play and you draw a bunch of Restless Ridgelines with it. But for the most part, it's just going to make sure you have good colored mana, which this deck is going to have really good colored mana because it has so many good dual lands. Sideboard of another Alchemy dinosaur. This is the Stalwart Speartail. So this is a 4/4 that when it takes damage, it causes all your other dinosaurs, including the ones in your hand and in your library, to grow. So that's like the Alchemy angle of the card, that it affects cards not in play, and it affects them perpetually. I think that for the most popular decks in Alchemy are mostly playing black for removal, which this thing is not very good against because you're just playing a 3-mana 4/4 that just dies to go for the throat and you didn't get anything out of it. Or Lend a Ham can also kill it and you didn't get anything. But where this card shines is if you're playing against red or green decks where they're going to have to kill the creature with damage. And usually against red or green decks, the sizing of your creatures matters a lot. So having the rest of your deck grow as the game goes on is a really big deal. So that's where I like this card. 4 Tranquil Frillbacks. It's a dinosaur, and it can get rid of artifacts and enchantments. Also gives you a way to gain life if you play against a deck where you really care about your life total. Some Lithomantic Barrages. I don't know that there's a particularly popular Alchemy deck where this card is great, but it is just a really, really strong card. And I kind of had room in my sideboard, so I decided to play some. 2 Witchstalker Frenzies. This is obviously to kill Sheoldred for the most part. The other option is Nahiri's Warcrafting, and I think that you could really go either way. I wasn't wild about playing a double red card, and also when you're looking for a card mostly to kill Sheoldred, the Warcrafting doesn't really have any upside. If I was looking for a card that was like more all around that could also kill Sheoldred, I would probably play Warcrafting. Then I've got 2 Lukkas. I think this is a pretty strong Planeswalker, and it's in my sideboard specifically if I play against people who have like Sunfall sweepers, because this deck is just all creatures I put into play, so with the exception of Spawning Pod. So if they Sunfall, they're going to be able to wipe your board completely. And I wanted to have something that could live through that and, give me some value against a sweeper heavy deck. All right, let's play some games. Do I want my 4th land, or do I want to keep all my spells? I think I want to keep all my lands. If I only keep 3 lands and the Paleontologist dies, I'm going to be pretty sad. This removal spell is pretty good. It powers up. There's a card that's like Barter in Blood that's a chorus. It's pretty strong. It's also a 5-mana draw 3 that they've turned into a 5-mana draw 5 at this point. So that's not very good for me. Beginning to wish that I had kept the Trumpeting Carnosaur. Ooh, an actual counterspell. Need my Cavern of Souls on dinosaurs. This doesn't seem like a game I'm going to win. At least they didn't play the... I don't know the name of the chorus draw spell, but probably would have conceded had he played it that turn. Very much wishing I had kept that Trumpeting Carnosaur. I've drawn 2 Delighted Halflings, and the rest lands as my draw steps. It's not very good. Get hit by this land. You know you're not doing good when the control deck's attacking you with this thing. Could still win if I top deck Etali. Come on, resolve and hit Spawning Pod. Paleontologist is pretty good. If this lives, I'll be able to start recasting my dinosaurs. It didn't live. So far, the chorus is pretty boring. I've just been singing the same song over and over. What do I want? Probably Scalespeaker Shepherd. Come on, give me something good. They do have edicts in their deck. I don't think I'm that into gaining life. I think I'll just take the Charging Monstrosaur. That way next turn I can play Monstrosaur plus Bramble Familiar, even if my Scalespeaker Shepherd dies. I think I'm just going to attack with the Ruby Daring Familiar. Ruby Daring Tracker. Would be 3 power. 2-turn clock this way. They can leave the Restless Speartail to block. Oh no, they finally drew one of their other songs. Hope they don't have the Edict song. This is the Edict song. If you're wondering if I thought that was good for me, I didn't. I didn't like it at all. Seems like their deck actually doesn't even have very good targets for either of these cards. Guess I'll take Savage Stomp. Look at nice Gandalf Sanction deck. Come on, something good. Sack a token creature, brutal. Oh, that was a good turn at least. I don't know if it's going to be enough. Still got 3 cards in hand. Spoiler, it wasn't enough. So you can't exile things from the graveyard with this. I don't think I want to board in the Frillback just to try to fight their Tranquil or their Gandalf Sanction, but I guess I don't have all that much that's worth boarding in. I don't want to Abrade in my deck. I think I do want Lukka. This is the first time I've wished I had a different 4-drop, because the Vantasaur really ain't going to be about much. But it's the only 4-drop I got, so I'm not going to board it out. I guess I could trim some of them. I don't need 4. Do I want this thing in my deck? Some of the removal dealt damage. I think I would rather just have the Frillback, though, and in a long game I can use it to shut down Gandalf's Sanction to an extent. This doesn't work off of exiled cards, right? No, it's just cards in graveyard. It's not a very good hand, but their deck is set up to play very long games, so I'd rather keep a spell-heavy hand. I'm not going to run out of action. Don't fear the Paleontologist. I wanted to play Impulse instead. Oh, it's Forbidden Alchemy. Guess that matters for the Gandalf Sanction. Confound it. Confound it. There's a lot of copies of Confounding Riddle I'm being expected to play against. I'm worried that they have the edict, so I didn't want to just jam creatures. Yeah. Didn't really have much of a choice. Ooh, Reggie. feel like I have much of a chance to win, but maybe I do. They just have a bunch of lands and 1-for-1 removal. Can still play the game. The fact that they played that means they don't have the Edict in their hand. Also, why did they kill the... I think they could have done that better. Couldn't they have killed the 4/4? For a while I was playing with some copies of Royal Treatment, and I felt like there was no matchups where it was better than just having like a creature in my deck. But this would obviously be a matchup where it would actually be pretty good. I've been defeated. Fully sanctioned. It was kind of a cool deck the opponent had. This is a far better starting hand than I had in either of the previous games. Schooner. Schooner does not see a ton of play in Alchemy. I'm not really sure why. The anti-schooner technology is online. I think I'm gonna, well, I'm obviously putting this on Dinosaur, and then I think I'm gonna just do this, get a Savage Stomp, and kill Malcolm. My other option this turn would have been to play another Scalespeaker Shepherd and Frillback and kill the Schooner. This way I'm attacking for more, and I have a giant blocker that the Schooner can't attack through, and they don't get to attack with Malcolm. I don't know what this card does. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can reveal an artifact or pirate among them. Okay. And they got like an Edict card. Getting the Schooner out of the way now. So I definitely want to Abrade against the person who has the Schooners and small creatures. Lithomantic Barrage seemed pretty good too. They have mostly blue creatures. I didn't see Sheoldred, so I'm not going to board in Witchstalker Frenzy, because I don't want to cut that many creatures from my deck. So it makes the pods not function. There are times when I'm going to sideboard out pod but I don't think this is one of them. I want a Carnosaur? Maybe not. Look at that. Green-red pathway. Working out great. These Restless Ridgelines are going to be kind of awkward. Beginning of your end step, if 2 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control this turn, conjure a card named Thieving Magpie. I like the idea of that. So it's right on the battlefield? It's not that friendly, on it. Oh man. This doesn't help me with my all tapped lands problem. I think I'm going to get naturalized because it's just going to work. I'm not going to have to worry about when I'm trying to cast it to make sure it doesn't fizzle. And they've got stuff like this and the schooner, and I saw there was like another one of these crafting artifacts. Oh, they get the Thieving Magpie now. Brutal. Would have been a good turn to draw a creature. Or at minimum a land that came into play untapped. Not that the land coming into play untapped really would have mattered all that much. Going to be overrun by Thieving Magpies. If you're wondering if this is going well, it's not. It's not going well at all. I still sort of have a shot, to be honest, though. Especially if I draw an untapped land. I'll be able to play Burning Sun's Avatar, kill a Thieving Magpie, and then pod into an Etali. And, you know, who knows what could happen from that spot. Let's find out. The Tome of Gadwick, that was a bit of a letdown. Just being edicted into oblivion. It's all edicts and thieving magpies. This thing. Is this the one where they look at my hand? It is. I probably have to take Pod, yeah. Paleontologist and a Bramble Familiar. So I think I have enough mana I can actually fight with this thing next turn. That's fine. I'm just going to play it with the Paleontologist or not. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm potting I was going to say potting a Shepherd into a Naturalized, but I think what I'm going to do instead is pot a Bramble Familiar into a Shepherd. What does this card do? Let's get Gishoth. That could be fun. I can play it because of the Delighted Halfling. Can't play it anymore. You've ruined my whole plan, opponent. How rude. And I can exile the Territorial Allosaurus if I want to have the option of casting that next turn. Although I'm really hoping to play this Gishoth. I did pot away yet another one of the Shepherds, though, so I'm not going to have enough mana to do that. Wait, do I kill them if I attack with this? I think I do. Alright, this effectively attacks for 5. I've done it! This is not a good hand. This is also not a good hand, but I will keep it. I kept on the strength of having lands to give me a lot of choices. And also on the fact that I don't really think mulling to 5 is a very good strategy ever. This is the keep 5 lands and a Delighted Halfling and just hope the top of my deck is kind. Hopefully this doesn't die. It seems pretty likely to, though. It's a red deck that hasn't played any spells yet. Well, they're not attacking with the Swift Spear. And they didn't play Gabbard. They played Palantir of Ortho. Was not expecting that one. I'm like vaguely in the market for the life gain from the Verdant Sun's Avatar, but it's just going to cost too much mana, I think. Oh, reach. Reach for the skies, shifting Ceratops. I think I'm going to give them the card this time, and then I'm going to pod this into the Vantasaur. Naturalize. Oh, come back. Alright, so this is a matchup where I like the Frillbacks and I like the Speartails. And I don't really... I don't want all my pods, because I don't think pod is that good. I could just take out all the pods and take out all the Palantir Hatchers. Maybe do something more like that. Just make my deck lower to the ground. Feldman's pretty good against me. Probably just have to trade the Paleontologist with it. This is not a strong start to a game. Being overrun. This is until end of next turn, right? Or is it? Yeah, end of next turn, so they are going to get a card off of it. I'm going to get a Monstrous Rage. It's kind of annoying. Really need a Vantasaur next turn. Or I guess a Trumpeting Carnosaur if most of my creatures live. Tranquil Frillback also wouldn't be that bad. They're going to have a roll token that I could blow up and I could gain 4 life and it would be a respectable blocker. When I was listing things I was hoping to draw. Another land wasn't on the list. This doesn't seem very likely to work. Ooh, the Delighted Halfling is going to be able to give me red mana because this is legendary. It's going to be big. I think my opponent's deck is going to have a hard time with the Winged Vantasaur. At least that's my hope. Or maybe I was supposed to just play a Paleontologist. I was so excited about being able to use the Ruby Daring Tracker. Turn 3, I played a 5/6 that killed their creature, and it has reach. I don't think the red deck's going to enjoy the game that starts like that. Come on, something good. Just give me something good. Bramble Familiar, not really that good, but I guess it'll do. Holy cow. Taking a lot of damage. I might be killing them on the crackback, though. I guess no, I have red mana from this. So that's probably enough to kill them. That's certainly enough. I had really bad experiences with animating this thing where it taps lands in weird ways that make it so that you don't get to attack the way you want. Alright, well that worked out pretty well. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. This, I think, is a reasonably competitive deck. I don't know that it's like a top tier deck, but it is a pretty good way to use Spawning Pod, so I'm in for that. It did seem like I could probably trim a Lithomantic Barrage for a royal treatment, you know, like one or two of those, which would have certainly helped against the Grixis all removal spell deck. But yeah, other than that, I think this is a pretty tight list. There are a lot of sideboard slots devoted to Tranquil Frillbacks and Stalwart Speartails. Maybe that's not the most efficient use of sideboard space, but I do think that they're both very good cards in good matchups for them. I guess the one other thing you could have in the sideboard if you wanted to beat that Overcooked deck I've played a bunch is, I think, Fade into History is legal in this format. Is that what it's called? Yeah, this thing. If you're really sick of losing to Overcooked decks, you could play with this in your sideboard. The Frillbacks and the Vantasaurs give you a really good game plan anyway, but if you wanted, you know, just a very specific hate card, this is the card to put in your sideboard. Hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time, which is probably going to be when Timeless debuts. So in a few days. Thanks for watching.